Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to this latest video. We'll cover an extensive review of water year 2017-18, and then that'll set us up to go into the outlook for 2018 and 19 with a better understanding of some of the climate extremes and what goes into the forecast process. All this is in an effort for Weather Ready Nation to understand the climate and hazards better and to prepare for what could come our way during our wet season. This is Alex Tardy, meteorologist with National Weather Service. We haven't seen this for a while. This was 2 years ago, late February 2017 in San Diego, but it gives us an idea of what can happen when the right conditions set up during the winter months. For the upcoming winter hazards, these are some of the hashtags we will use in Southern California as shown here. Let's take a look at last year, the water year. Well, for the state of California, it ended up below normal. The blue line was below the black line as shown here. Precipitation was quite a bit below normal, but not in record territory for statewide. Now for Southern California, which includes our mountains, deserts, coast, and valleys, it was a different story. Precipitation during the past water year, it was one of the driest on record for all areas. You can see the black average line indicated here, and the actual rainfall was much below normal and right around the record territory of driest. What happened last year? Well, the opportunities for significant rainfall or the atmospheric rivers, the individual storms and series of storms went well to our north, mostly north of Sacramento as shown here. We had three opportunities, if you recall, back in March, and then also a big storm that impacted Southern California, really our main storm that was January 9th and 10th. This was below average even for our region considerably. Now the good news is that the water supply across the state is in pretty good shape, not including Lake Oroville where construction is just wrapping up on that reservoir. Most of the major reservoirs are right around their normal average level for this time of the year, November 1st. Across the western U.S., this is how the water year looked like, particularly the southwest United States, our region. You can see the percent of normal was in red. That's all across Southern California, 30 to 50% of normal, even less than what they should receive occurred in the Imperial Valley. This extended into the Colorado region. In fact, that region up to the Four Corners is shown on the right as the record driest. So very dry conditions across the southwest U.S. In particular, if you look at Santa Ana, the numbers are staggeringly. 2.5 inches of rain, that's it. We saw some really low numbers during the core of the drought a couple years ago, but conditions for 2017-18 water year, the driest on record now for Santa Ana. Now what about San Diego? Well, we fell just shy, but for all intents and purposes, one of the driest years on record, just a little bit more than 2001-2002. Now snowfall, that was a big problem as well, as very little snowfall occurred. If you don't have storms coming through our region, you're not going to get much snow, and if you have really warm conditions, the snow levels are going to be high and it's going to melt early as well. But the actual snow that fell was mostly in the measurement of inches in places that usually receive feet in our San Bernardino and Riverside mountains. This has been a trend over the past years. Other than the really snowy winter for some big storms in 2016-17 atmospheric rivers, when you look back, you can see we've had some really low snowfall amounts across our mountains. Now, when you start looking at the summer and the monsoon, you can see most of our region was in the red, which means drier than it should be for our mountains and deserts, which sometimes can receive some beneficial rainfall. We did receive some rain, however, in the San Bernardino and Riverside County mountains, and that area came out right about average. Now, some good news is that the Arizona region ended up above average during the peak of the monsoon period, which typically is between July and September. Now, what was remarkable was most of the precipitation of greatest significance occurred from tropical cyclone Rosa and Sergio remnants. And in fact, look at these numbers here for the desert Southwest, ended up being several 100% above normal. And even some of that extended into northern San Diego County and Riverside County and our deserts as well, where significant flooding occurred. So quite unusual to have two tropical storm remnants moving into our region. Now when you take a look at temperature for the summer period, or June through September, you can see it was quite remarkably warm. In fact, the red areas, when you average the temperature over that period, record warmest. And even areas in orange indicate the top 10%. Now across Southern California, you can also see when you focus between June and August, temperatures were remarkably warm as well. In fact, the warmest on record. This averages all areas, including the mountains, deserts, and coast. Now when you take a look, particularly July and August, temperatures were much above normal. The anomaly, or the departure from the average 30-year temperature, was in the red shaded area, which is several degrees above normal across most of Southwest California. Now when we asked the question, was that record warmest? Well, it really was for a lot of places in the mountains, the deserts, the Coachella Valley, parts of LA County and into Orange County, and even speckled across San Diego County. So basically the July-August period was the top 3 hottest on record across Southern California. This includes high temperatures, low temperatures during that entire period, averaged together. One particular event was incredibly warm. July 6, we saw temperatures, for example, Ramona 117, which shattered their old all-time record of 111. They weren't the only hot spot. You can see from Escondido all across to Chino, San Bernardino, Riverside, all those places extremely hot. And basically what happened, that particular heat wave, is we had an upper level high pressure, but we also had offshore flow that just shut off the sea breeze and allowed these extreme temperatures to mix out from the hot atmosphere above us. All-time highs. So temperatures were not just hot on the coast and in the summer, but take a look at this chart here, the hottest year on record so far for Palm Springs. So hot conditions in an area, yes, used to heat, but not used to heat this extreme. The average temperature for San Diego during the core of the summer, July and August, was shown here. It ended up being in second place. We also had a lot of warm overnight lows above 70 degrees. In fact, a stretch of 36 days, and that's what definitely helped drive this number up. Now for Santa Ana, first place July and August, incredible, and they've already seen the past 4 years with numbers making it into the top 10, and this past year was the warmest. Now if you look at the average temperature during the water year, you can see that it is also quite remarkable. So temperatures were averaging several degrees above normal during the entire season. And when you ask the question, was it record warmest? Well, yeah, it was for most of New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado River Valley, and then spilling down into the mountains and deserts of our region. Really hot conditions over the past water year. Well, that does have an impact too, and that's why the drought has expanded. So those hot temperatures lead to more evaporation and drier soil conditions. This map here tries to reflect that, and you can see the D2 region has started to expand, but really the heart of the drought right now is focused across the Colorado River Valley and the Four Corners area, where things are extreme. And also some bad conditions starting to develop in Oregon. This also has an impact on our fuel moisture. Take a look at this map here across Southern California for our mountain areas, where those areas can be susceptible to large fires. We had fuel conditions that were around record lows as we went through July and August. Now we had nice October rains that I showed you in the earlier slides from Sergio and Rosa, remnant moisture. But even now currently, those conditions are right back down to near the red line, which is near record low levels. So fuel conditions very dry this fall 2018. Now let's take a look. Also what happened during the summer is the peak sea surface temperatures. Those are departing from an average sea surface temperature. We saw the warmest conditions in late July and early August, and they peaked out around August 9th, where we were looking at ocean temperatures about 10 degrees above normal. And not just on the beach, it extended far to our south and offshore, as shown here. In fact, at La Jolla, they set all-time record highs for ocean temperatures, peaking out at 80 degrees. Those records go back to 1920. This also brought an impact to our climate, and with those warm conditions, just like you see in Florida or the Gulf of Mexico, when you start talking water temperatures that warm, well, it affects your humidity. It adds more moisture to the air we live in. Overnight low temperatures are warmer, and we really felt that, and this shows it here. When you look between the period of June all the way through early September, humidity was much above normal and centered right over our region. Here's a quick recap. It was the top driest year on record. Number 1 for Santa Ana, 2 for San Diego. Fuel moisture conditions have suffered over the course of the summer because of the record dry winter, because of the warm summer, and now we're seeing near record low conditions even here in the fall, despite some October rain. Summer, it's supposed to be hot July, August, right? But it was record warm, record warm. The minimum temperatures were also affected. They were record warm. That brought our humidity up to much above normal levels. That was also attributed to the record sea surface temperatures. The monsoon was average or below average, depending where you were. We did see some good rainfall in San Bernardino and Riverside County mountains, but that was about it. The drought, because of last water year, has worsened and expanded over SoCal. One good news to note here is the water supply, at least statewide, is in pretty good shape. In San Diego County, our local reservoirs are about 45% of average, and statewide we are about average to just slightly below. Now what are we going to look at? Well, we turn to the ocean to see what's going on, and we see a few things. Across the North Pacific, Alaska region, unusually warm waters continue in that area, so much above normal. Western Pacific, the same thing. Now to the south of San Diego, the big star there, you can see warm water continues to linger, and a lot of that water fed into our region over the summer and contributed to those record-breaking ocean temperatures. Now across the ENSO area, or El Nino region, along the equatorial Pacific Ocean from South America westward, south of Hawaii, we also see warming occurring, and we're going to talk about that here as it looks like an El Nino is developing. But what is troubling with this image is there's a lot of warm water in the Pacific. The Pacific is much above normal, so it's not just El Nino going on. We've seen El Nino in the past. In fact, the super El Nino of a couple years ago. And again, El Nino is a measure of sea surface temperatures, not rainfall. So that materialized into the strongest El Nino along the equatorial Pacific Ocean we've ever seen. And then we cycled into some La Nina, and now it looks like we're cycling, as normal, back into an El Nino phase. What is El Nino real quick? Well, it's basically the Pacific Ocean along the equator. All those trade winds build up the water in the Western Pacific, and that water gets really warm. But El Nino actually is a process to compensate and bring that warm water eastward and redistribute it. A very normal, natural process. When you change things in the tropics, though, you're changing a lot of conditions that force rainfall, locally heavy rainfall in those tropical regions. And that in turn can also affect your jet stream. But every El Nino is different. Every single one is differently how the jet stream responds. And we learned that 2 years ago when the jet stream just stayed to our north over the Pacific Northwest in that super El Nino. Here are the computer model predictions for this upcoming wet season El Nino development. They actually do a pretty good job on predicting ocean temperatures along the equator, because that's what El Nino is. And the expectation is for weak conditions in the heart of the winter, December through February, borderline under moderate conditions. Now, this is something to look at very closely. So before we label El Niños as being wet, take a look at the left-hand side first. When you look at all the weak to moderate El Niños, and all the years are listed there for you, you can see we have a blue kind of greenish signal of above normal precipitation during those years. However, when you remove two of the wettest, which is 94-95, 04-05, some big rain years here for Southern California, you can see not only does Northern California become very dry, there's also a tendency for dry or near average in Southern California. So this is a portion of what goes into predicting the upcoming winter, taking this into account. Another statistic to take a look at that's very important to consider in our recent climate, over the past 10 years in Southern California, the wettest years have been La Nina, the cold phase in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, as shown here. And it's not really even close. Those years were very wet, 2010, 2011, and then, of course, a couple years ago, 2016-17. This past water year, remarkably dry, all areas in Southern California. And this was also in our mountain regions. Since I know you love a lot of statistics, I included the mountain locations here as well for you to take a look at, where the signal for La Nina also shows up very evident. What do we have in store for the month of November coming up here? Well, a little bit of good news. So the upper level ridge of high pressure that's been giving us really warm conditions in October, and also the Santa Ana wind events, is expected to shift to the east as shown here. And so that doesn't necessarily cool us off per se. It does open the door for potential some rainfall starting in middle of November, and maybe another chance in the latter part of November as indicated here, as we start getting some upper level troughiness in the Great Basin and perhaps a little bit of tap into tropical moisture. So that's a good change, maybe a chance for some beneficial rainfall in this critical time of the year with our fuel moisture being so dry and during Santa Ana season. Now the official outlook kind of indicates that too. It puts us in between things, which basically means that the Great Basin and Four Corners area are expected to be wetter than normal during the middle to latter part of November, and the warmest temperatures get shunted a little bit further north in that orange shaded on the right. Okay, probably the outlook that you've been waiting for. This is the winter outlook for December through February. We had to go through the climate and the other information about the past water year and El Nino to kind of set you up here to explain why the area is white. That means there's a large part of California where it's not expected to be above normal, not expected to be below normal, so you have basically equal chances. Now across Southern California in the green shade, there is a little bit of indication of above normal rainfall between December through February, so when you add up all the storms. So it looks like enough of an El Nino impact from that tropical shower activity that develops from that unusually warm water could bring a few series of storms into our region. In fact, there are some computer models indicating that, particularly for December and January. So that confidence is a little higher as you go across the south and into Florida based on the maps you saw before. So not a complete bust in terms of the outlook, but there is a slight chance of conditions getting above normal and a better chance that conditions will be right around average. Average is 10 inches for Riverside and San Diego and about 13 for Santa Ana and Orange County. Now, an easier part of the forecast is the temperature outlook. We've been seeing the past several winters being above normal and also expected to occur again. Warmer than average conditions for December through February, the core of our winter. This does have an impact on us because it can lead to fire conditions sometimes in the spring and also earlier snow melt than we'd like to see. Here's the summary of the highlights in the take-home points. So we see critically dry conditions as shown in earlier slides. We expect about 7 to 10 Santa Ana wind events this fall. Remember, Santa Ana's peak in December, and that's why it's critical to get rain in the fall, such as November. We've already seen 3 Santa Ana wind events. Warm fall conditions and those Santa Ana wind events The good news is there's the potential for some precipitation, rainfall mid to late November. We do see developing El Nino conditions. Caution with that. That's the warm phase along the equatorial Pacific Ocean. But the last winters that have been wet have actually been La Nina, the cool phase. The weak to moderate El Nino conditions have brought dry winters, for the exception of a couple years that we talked about, 94, 95, 2004, 2005. So that's a part of what goes into our weather forecast and why the confidence is not unusually high despite El Nino developing. The near average precipitation is basically the forecast, but the past winters have not just been coming distributed very well. They've been coming all in chunks. We've seen more extreme precipitation and high wind events. So that's something that we need to focus on more when it comes to preparing. We do expect extended dry conditions, and then when we do have storms, those individual storms could have heavy rain. So that's when it's important to pay attention to the weather forecast and to prepare now when it's not raining. The mild winters have been a trend, and we expect more mild winter conditions this year, which leads to the earlier snow melt than we like to see. The basic National Weather Service entry page at weather.gov looks like this, and then you click on the location that you're most interested in, or even customize and add a zip code. And for example, in Southern California, it pops up like this, and you have choices that indicate where you can get forecasts, current observations, climate conditions, the weather story of the day. The map below is the point and click, and that'll also contain the watch advisory and warning. The current observation page is one of my favorite. You can look at real-time weather and track what the wind conditions and temperatures and rainfall is doing all across our region, and zoom in and zoom out. Now, if you're looking at monitoring precipitation under our observations, you can get maps like this, and this is very useful for monitoring current rainfall, not forecast rainfall, but what has already fallen. You can also get that from weather.gov, where they incorporate a lot of the radar data, where you can take a nice look of how much rainfall has occurred in the past 24 hours or even the past month. Finally, for this upcoming winter, I want to leave you with some of the key notices that National Weather Service put out. And these are messages that you will see during any winter storm that is expected to bring heavy rain or high winds. The watch warning advisory is the process, and then when things get very significant in terms of property or life-threatening, you may see warnings such as flash flood warnings. And here are the definitions. Take some time to review it. Thanks for watching this video presentation. Hope you'll be safe for this upcoming winter season.